The interstellar lounge was alive with noise, a constant hum of voices, engines, and the faint vibration of distant spacecraft. Travelers from countless worlds walked past, their forms strange and beautiful, their languages a melody of sounds that no one human tongue could follow. Some wore glowing robes, others carried tools that shimmered with energy, and a few were beings of pure light or metal, their movements mechanical yet graceful. It was a place where diversity of life stretched across the stars, and yet, even here, there were invisible lines of fear and judgment. She appeared suddenly, stepping through the sliding doors like a shadow made of color. Her body was taller than most humans, slender yet strong, with skin that shimmered in waves of silver, blue, and green, as if the light of the stars had been caught in her veins. Her eyes glowed softly, warm and sad, reflecting the lights of the lounge like tiny suns trapped in glass. The instant she walked in, a hush seemed to fall over her surroundings, not out of respect but out of discomfort. People turned away, whispered among themselves, or avoided her entirely. It was as if she carried the weight of the galaxy's fear on her shoulders. She walked carefully, each step measured and deliberate. Her hands, long and delicate, brushed against the smooth metal of the walls, as if grounding herself in a world that refused to notice her. The lounge's crowd parted subtly, some out of curiosity, others out of unease. No one spoke to her, no one smiled, no one dared to acknowledge that she existed. She moved as though invisible, slipping past chatter and laughter, looking for a place to sit for a moment of quiet in the chaos. I noticed her immediately. There was something in her posture, a mixture of strength and fragility, that drew me in. She did not look around in arrogance or demand attention. She only looked for a safe spot, a place to exist without being hunted by judgment. Her loneliness was loud, almost tangible, and it tugged at something inside me that I had never felt before. Without thinking, I moved toward her. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't even know if she wanted me there. But I wanted to let her know she was not entirely invisible. I sat down beside her, careful not to startle her. I didn't speak, not yet. I simply offered the presence of someone willing to see her without question. Her eyes flicked toward me, and I caught a brief spark of surprise there. She stiffened for a moment, unsure, hesitant, but I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat quietly. Time slowed. The chaos of the lounge, laughter, shouting, announcements faded into the background. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she was not alone. Minutes passed in silence. Slowly, her body loosened. The tension in her shoulders eased. She shifted slightly, as if testing the safety of this stranger beside her. She opened a small bag and pulled out a glowing device, her long fingers brushing over its surface with care. She fiddled with it quietly, and I continued to sit, giving her space but sharing my presence. I could feel her gaze on me from the corner of her eye. It was cautious, tentative, almost afraid. Yet there was also curiosity, a fragile trust that hadn't been there when she first entered the lounge. I didn't speak because sometimes words can shatter what silence builds. Instead, I simply offered my attention, a small, steady acknowledgement of her existence. Other travelers looked at her, some with confusion, some with suspicion, but I ignored them. I focused on her. Slowly, very slowly, she leaned slightly toward me. Not close, not intimate, just enough to acknowledge that someone had chosen to sit beside her without fear. And for a moment, a small, almost imperceptible smile flickered across her glowing lips, fragile but genuine. In that crowded, loud, and often cold lounge, something rare had begun. Recognition, compassion, a quiet understanding that even across the stars, even among beings who had never seen her kind before, someone could sit beside her without judgment, without words, simply offering presence and acknowledgement. And perhaps, I thought, that was all anyone ever really needed. The lounge continued its endless hum of noise, but for us it felt smaller, slower, softer. Time had shifted around the two of us, folding into a pocket of quiet in the middle of chaos. She remained beside me, her glowing eyes flicking between the people who ignored her and the device she held in her hands. I didn't speak, and neither did she, yet the silence was not empty. It was full of understanding, a bridge forming between two beings who had no words in common, no shared history, yet shared a simple human truth: the need to be seen. I watched her closely. Every tiny movement seemed meaningful, the way she adjusted the folds of her shimmering robes, the way her long fingers traced patterns across the glowing surface of her device, the slight tension in her shoulders. Each gesture told a story of caution, of weariness, of a life spent being watched, judged, and often dismissed. And yet she still carried herself with grace, with dignity, refusing to let the world define her completely. Minutes stretched into an hour. The lounge felt indifferent to her presence, but not to me. I remained still, my body relaxed, my gaze calm. I wanted her to feel that my attention was not fleeting, that even in a world that ignored her, someone was willing to sit quietly beside her without fear, without expectation. Slowly, I felt her body relax, almost imperceptibly. Her fingers stopped fidgeting, her shoulders lost their tight tension, and the small device in her hand was set aside, forgotten for the first time since she entered. She turned her glowing eyes toward me, and I saw something I hadn't expected: curiosity. A fragile curiosity wrapped in caution. Her lips parted slightly, not quite a smile, but a soft acknowledgement. It was as if she was testing me, wondering if this human could truly be different from the rest. I gave her no words, only the quiet presence I had offered from the beginning. And slowly that fragile trust began to grow. Other travelers noticed. Some whispered. A few glanced over, their expressions shifting from confusion to mild surprise. No one approached, no one dared to intervene. Yet their attention was irrelevant. What mattered was the connection forming in that small corner of the lounge. And it was a connection that needed no translation, no gestures beyond the simplest ones, sitting together, sharing silence, and allowing the other to exist fully. I could sense her hesitation still, but it was softening. She shifted slightly closer, not too close, not intimate, just enough to feel safe. The faintest trace of a smile appeared on her lips, almost shy, almost embarrassed. I smiled back subtly, not to force anything, only to let her know that her existence was acknowledged, and that acknowledgement could be enough to change the world. She finally spoke, a small melodic sound that broke the silence like a gentle ripple through water. "You sit." Her voice carried a mixture of surprise and relief, as if hearing a human word spoken without judgment was a novelty in itself. I simply nodded and replied, "Yes, I sit." The simplicity of the exchange made her lips curve into a broader smile, one that reached her glowing eyes. It was small, fragile, yet powerful, a moment of pure human connection. Time passed, and the lounge around us became a blur. People moved, conversations rose and fell, but for those two beings sitting side by side, the rest of the galaxy ceased to exist. The tension that had clung to her like a shadow began to lift. She adjusted her posture, sitting taller, her presence no longer weighted by fear or uncertainty. The quiet companionship we shared was enough to heal small wounds, enough to remind her that not everyone ignored the alien. Not everyone feared what they did not understand. And in that silent companionship, something extraordinary happened. A seed of trust was planted. A spark of hope ignited. Two beings, different in every visible way, connected not through words, not through gestures, but through the quiet power of being seen. And for her, that simple act, someone sitting beside her quietly, without expectation, was more powerful than any words, any gift, or any ally in the universe could ever be. The quiet lingered between them like a warm blanket, soft and comforting. The alien woman no longer fidgeted with her device. It rested on her lap, forgotten. Her glowing eyes, once filled with suspicion and wariness, now held something different, a spark of curiosity and cautious trust. She glanced at me, studying, as if trying to understand what made me different from all the others who had ignored her. The lounge continued around us, loud and chaotic, but it no longer mattered. The conversations, the beeping machines, the bright lights, all of it faded into a background that could not touch the space we had quietly claimed. She shifted slightly, testing the boundaries, her shoulders relaxing with every passing moment. There was a rhythm forming between us, unspoken and steady, like two people learning the silent language of trust. Then, finally, she spoke. A soft, melodic sound, almost fragile, yet carrying the weight of 1,000 lonely moments. "You sit." Her voice wavered, not from fear, but from surprise. No one had ever spoken to her so simply, so freely, so without judgment. The words were small, almost hesitant, but they carried the relief of recognition. A recognition that she was allowed to exist, fully, without apology. I met her glowing eyes and nodded slowly. Yes, I sit. My voice was calm, quiet, but steady. There was no fanfare, no attempt to impress, just a simple acknowledgement that she was seen. The corners of her lips curved upward, shy at first, then more confident as the warmth of that simple truth sank in. For the first time in this crowded, judgmental lounge, she felt noticed. Not as an alien, not as a rumor, not as a threat, but as a being worthy of existence. Her gaze softened, and a faint smile spread across her features, brighter than any light in the room. It was fragile but real. I could feel it ripple outward, touching the space around her. She had been invisible for so long, ignored by nearly everyone, and now a single human had offered her attention, quiet and patient. That simple act of sitting beside her without words at first, without pressure, had broken through a wall that years of fear and isolation had built. A few other travelers glanced our way, curious now. Whispers traveled through the lounge, but their attention was irrelevant. She didn't notice them, not anymore. She leaned slightly closer, careful, cautious, as if testing whether this connection was real. Her glowing fingers brushed the edge of my sleeve, tentative, as though confirming that the human beside her was real, that the kindness was real, and that it was meant just for her. I didn't recoil. I didn't speak. I simply allowed the moment to continue, letting the silence carry the weight of trust. Slowly, her posture straightened. Her shoulders, once tense and guarded, fell into a relaxed, natural stance. The glow of her skin seemed warmer, brighter, as if reflecting the small light of hope that had begun to bloom within her. Thank you, she whispered, almost afraid to speak. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from emotion. For this. She gestured vaguely between us to the space we shared in silence. I smiled softly. No need, just sit, that's all. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. No one had ever given her that before. No one had ever offered acceptance without condition, without judgment, without demand. And in that moment, the alien woman realized something profound. Recognition, even in its simplest form, could be revolutionary. It could transform fear into trust, loneliness into hope, invisibility into presence. The lounge carried on, oblivious to the small miracle taking place on that metal bench. Ships docked, travelers moved, lights blinked, but in that small corner, two beings from different worlds shared something that mattered more than any spaceship, weapon, or technology: human connection. And slowly she leaned just a little closer, letting herself feel the warmth of someone willing to sit beside her without fear, without words, without expectation. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of a universe finally noticing her for the first time. The lounge buzzed around them, but the bubble they had formed remained intact. Even in a place full of travelers from countless worlds, it felt as if no one existed except the two of them. She still sat beside me, her glowing eyes scanning the room occasionally, wary of judgment but no longer tense. She had begun to trust that someone could see her, truly see her without fear or prejudice. I was alone, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. My world, it is gone. The words trembled, carrying grief that seemed far too heavy for one being to bear. Her eyes glimmered, reflecting a pain deeper than any human could imagine. Everything, my people, scattered. We are not welcome anywhere. No one trusts us. No one wants us. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't offer empty comfort or shallow apologies. I just let her speak, letting the story flow as she shared it, letting the silence between words hold space for her grief. The lounge around us continued, indifferent, but I didn't care. This moment was hers to share, and my role was simple: to witness her, to acknowledge her existence. Other travelers noticed her story without hearing it. They glanced at her with suspicion, unease, or simple curiosity. One human leaned closer and whispered to a friend, "Why is he talking to her? She's..." Different. Another alien shook its head, muttering in its own language. Some stopped entirely, staring at the two of us, unsure how to react. I didn't respond. Instead, I met her gaze and nodded gently, showing her that none of the outside noise mattered. "I don't care what they think," I said softly. "You exist. That is enough for me." Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and wonder. No one had ever said that to her. Not in all the worlds she had visited, not in all the years she had spent hiding, running, or being ignored. To hear someone affirm her right to exist without judgment, without question, was powerful. It made the loneliness she carried feel less permanent, less suffocating. She swallowed hard, her glowing lips trembling slightly. "You humans, you are different," she whispered. "Most fear us. They hate us. But you are kind. You see me." "Yes," I replied simply. "I see you, and I will stay, no matter what anyone else thinks." Her fingers brushed the edge of my sleeve tentatively, a small gesture of trust, almost afraid it might be taken away. I didn't move, letting her decide the boundaries, letting her know that her choice to trust me mattered more than fear. And slowly she leaned a little closer, just enough to share warmth without words. Minutes passed. The other travelers continued to stare, some whispering, others shaking their heads. But for her, their judgment no longer mattered. In that quiet companionship, she had found something far more important: recognition. She had been ignored, dismissed, feared, but now she was seen. Someone had chosen her, simply because she existed. She took a shaky breath and whispered, I forgot what it feels like to matter." Her glowing eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I forgot what it feels like to have someone beside me." "You matter," I said. "You always have. And I'm here. I'm not leaving." Her shoulders, once weighted with the invisible chains of loneliness and fear, relaxed fully. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. For the first time, she believed that perhaps the galaxy wasn't entirely full of judgment, fear, and hate. There were still beings willing to see the truth beyond appearances, willing to sit beside someone simply because they were there. And in that moment, the lounge seemed smaller, quieter, as if acknowledging the small revolution that had taken place. One human, by doing the simplest thing, by sitting beside an alien woman without fear, had begun to change her world. The lounge, with its endless noise and bustling travelers, seemed to fade into the background as we continued to sit together. Her glowing eyes no longer carried the same weight of fear and sadness. They flickered with curiosity, like a small star trying to shine through clouds. For the first time, I noticed subtle changes in her posture: a relaxed tilt of the head, a gentle rise of her shoulders, movements that hinted she was beginning to feel comfortable. "I never laughed," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Not in years." Her words trembled with the memory of isolation, a memory too heavy for anyone to carry alone. She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing patterns in the air, unsure if laughter was even allowed, if it was something she deserved. "Try," I said simply. "Just try." Her eyes flicked up, wide and hesitant, as if the idea was impossible. And then, slowly, a tiny smile appeared at the corner of her glowing lips. A faint, fragile curve, barely noticeable but unmistakable. It was the first sign that the walls she had built around herself were beginning to crumble, that the weight of judgment from countless worlds was losing its hold. I smiled back. "It's okay," I whispered. "You can laugh here." She hesitated. Then a small sound escaped her, a soft melodic laugh, shaky and uncertain. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a sound that seemed to carry both sorrow and relief. And then I laughed too, a little awkwardly at first, and we shared that sound together. The laughter bridged the silence between us, connecting our worlds in a simple, human moment. Around us, other travelers began to notice. Some stopped and stared, unsure what to make of it. A few whispered, but no one dared approach. And yet, it no longer mattered. The laughter was ours, private yet powerful. A quiet rebellion against fear and prejudice. It was a reminder that even in a galaxy full of judgment, kindness and connection could exist. She laughed again, this time louder, more confident. Her glowing skin seemed to shimmer with the warmth of that sound, casting soft, colorful reflections across the metal walls of the lounge. I could see the tension melt away from her shoulders, the lines of worry fade from her face. She was no longer an outsider to herself, no longer burdened by years of being unseen. She was here, fully, and she was allowed to feel joy. "You humans," she said between laughs, her tone filled with wonder. You are strange, but kind. I never thought I would laugh with anyone again." "You're allowed," I replied simply. "No one can take that from you." Her eyes glimmered, reflecting both the lights of the lounge and the small hope blossoming inside her. She leaned slightly closer, tentatively, as if testing whether this connection was real. The simple act of being beside someone who didn't judge her, who shared laughter without expectation, was transforming her. She was learning that the universe was not entirely full of fear and distrust. There were still beings willing to see her, to acknowledge her existence, to celebrate it. Minutes passed and our laughter faded into smiles, soft and genuine. The alien woman's entire presence seemed lighter, freer, as though the weight of years of isolation had been lifted, even if only slightly. She glanced around at the lounge, her glowing eyes still radiant, and I saw something rare, a spark of courage. She would face the world again, but now she carried with her a memory that could not be erased, a memory that someone, a human, had offered laughter, joy, and acceptance without fear. "Thank you," she whispered softly, her glowing fingers brushing mine briefly, a simple gesture of gratitude. "For everything, for this moment," I smiled quietly. "No thanks needed, just sit. That's all." And in that small, loud lounge filled with strangers from countless worlds, two beings from different planets shared a moment that spoke louder than words, louder than prejudice, louder than fear itself. For her, that first laugh was more than joy. It was a spark of hope, a light in the darkness, proof that connection and trust could exist even when the universe seemed determined to deny it. Time passed slowly in the lounge, but for her, every second felt different. The alien woman no longer seemed afraid. Her glowing eyes, once wary and filled with loneliness, now shimmered with trust and warmth. She had laughed, she had spoken, and she had shared a small part of herself with someone who didn't judge her. For the first time in countless years, she felt the simple but powerful truth. She was not invisible. She mattered. Her shuttle had been called minutes ago, but she didn't rush. Instead, she sat quietly, her gaze lingering on the human who had sat beside her without a word, without fear. The rest of the lounge, with its bright lights and endless chatter, felt distant, unimportant. What mattered was here in this small corner of connection and trust. I never imagined someone would just sit with me, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, and not ask, not judge, not fear me. She hesitated, unsure if the words could carry the weight of what she felt. "I feel safe, I feel seen, for the first time in so long." "You are seen," I said simply, my voice steady, "and I'm here. I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever, for as long as you need." Her glowing eyes filled with something deeper than gratitude, something like awe. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever given her a choice to exist freely, without fear, without prejudice. Her people had been scattered, hunted, and dismissed. But here, on this metal bench in a crowded interstellar lounge, she had been allowed to be herself. Fully. She took a shaky breath, her glowing fingers brushing against mine, tentative but not afraid. It was a small gesture, but it carried enormous meaning. It was trust, connection, a silent promise that the kindness she had received here could echo beyond this room, beyond this planet, beyond her years of fear. Other travelers glanced at us, curiosity mixed with suspicion. Some whispered, others stared openly, but she no longer noticed them. Their judgment had no power over her now. She had tasted something stronger than fear, acceptance. She had felt it, alive and real, through the simple act of someone sitting beside her and sharing a moment without judgment. Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile, the kind that reaches the eyes and lingers there. I don't think I will forget this. Ever. Her voice trembled with emotion, the weight of years of isolation falling away. I want to believe. Maybe there is hope. Maybe the universe is not entirely full of fear and hate. You're right, I said. There is hope. And it starts small. Sometimes it begins with just one person, willing to see another for who they truly are. Her eyes glimmered, reflecting the lights of the lounge and the spark of hope that had grown within her. She stood slowly, the long, graceful movements of her body showing newfound confidence. Her posture was no longer tense. It was proud, steady, and ready to face the world again. She was not the same alien woman who had walked into this lounge earlier. She carried strength, courage, and a memory that could never be erased. She looked at me one last time, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude and warmth. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me. For standing with me. I will carry this with me. No thanks needed, I replied. Just sit. That's all it takes. And you did. You trusted. That's enough. And then she turned, her figure radiant, her glow stronger than before, and walked toward her shuttle. I watched her go, feeling a quiet pride. For the first time, she would leave this lounge not afraid, not alone, not invisible. She carried something stronger than fear or prejudice. She carried hope, courage, and the proof that simple human kindness could touch even the farthest corners of the galaxy. In that moment, I realized that humanity's true power wasn't in technology, ships, or weapons. It was in courage, compassion, and the willingness to stand beside someone without fear. And sometimes that simple act could change a life forever. The shuttle doors hissed open and the alien woman paused at the threshold. She turned her glowing eyes back toward the human who had sat beside her for hours, the one who had offered nothing but quiet presence and acceptance. For a moment the lounge seemed to hold its breath, as if the universe itself recognized the importance of what had just happened. You changed something, she whispered softly, her voice carrying a mixture of awe, relief, and gratitude. Not here, not this room, but inside me. You made me human, made me feel alive again. I smiled gently, shaking my head. No, I didn't make you human. You were human already in ways that matter most. Courage, trust, hope, you just remembered it. Her glow shimmered brighter, reflecting the soft lights of the lounge. She had carried so much loneliness, fear, judgment from countless worlds, and yet she had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to accept someone's kindness without question. That willingness to trust, to believe in something good in a stranger, was more powerful than any weapon or technology the galaxy had ever seen. She stepped onto her shuttle, but paused again, turning back one last time. I will never forget you. Never forget this. Her voice trembled with emotion, the weight of her words carrying more than gratitude. It carried transformation. In a galaxy full of fear, you reminded me there is hope, there is humanity, I nodded. Then take it with you. Let it guide you. Let it remind you that not everyone fears what is different. Some of us, we stand beside you, without words, without judgment. Just presence. That's enough. Her eyes glimmered, tears reflecting her radiant skin, and she finally smiled fully, a luminous, warm smile that reached the depths of her being. Enough, she whispered, as if tasting the word for the first time in decades. Yes, enough. The shuttle lifted slowly, rising above the docking platform, carrying her away from the lounge and the judgmental eyes that had followed her arrival. But she didn't feel alone anymore. She carried with her a memory, a small but unshakable proof that somewhere in the galaxy, someone had believed in her, had acknowledged her existence simply because it was right to do so. That memory was stronger than fear, brighter than prejudice, and more enduring than any distance between stars. I watched her shuttle ascend, a faint glow trailing behind it like stardust. Around me the lounge continued, loud and busy, but I felt a quiet satisfaction. The galaxy was vast, full of uncertainty, but even here, small acts of courage could ripple outward, changing lives in ways that no one could anticipate. A few travelers glanced at me with curiosity, some with doubt, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was what had been shared, an unspoken truth, a quiet revolution of compassion. She had been seen. She had been trusted. She had been given something far greater than a seat, far greater than words, the simple acknowledgement of her existence. Days later, I received a message from her. Short, simple, and powerful. You saved me. Not from danger, but from forgetting that life can be good. You saved me from losing hope. I smiled and read it again. That was humanity. Not strength, not weapons, not conquest, but courage to care, to stand beside another being, to be present without expectation. That small act could echo across galaxies, across lifetimes. It could turn fear into trust, isolation into connection, and loneliness into hope. And sometimes, that was enough to change the universe. Because in a galaxy that often ignored the unfamiliar, one human had done something extraordinary. One human had simply sat beside an alien woman without a word, and in that quiet, unassuming act, had reminded the galaxy of the power of kindness, trust, and the enduring spirit of humanity. Even when the stars seemed indifferent, humanity could shine.